In this video, we're counting down 3 fatal stories of what happens when people underestimate the animals they're dealing with. From intoxicated friends who thought a bear cub would make the perfect trophy, to a criminal who had no idea what was waiting in the patrol car. It was July 22nd, 2015, and the summer heat had finally broken across the forests of northern wilderness as Marcus and his 4 friends set up their campsite deep in the remote area. At 29 years old, Marcus worked as a sales manager and was known for his impulsive nature and tendency to take unnecessary risks when drinking. This annual camping trip had become a tradition among his college friends, though Marcus's reckless behavior had been escalating each year. They had driven 6 hours from the city, taking back roads into a remote section of national forest, where camping regulations were loosely enforced and ranger patrols were infrequent. The group had chosen this location specifically because of its isolation. They wanted to party without worrying about noise complaints or citations. By the time they finished setting up their tents around 3 in the afternoon, they had already consumed several beers each. The campsite sat in a small clearing surrounded by dense pine forest, approximately 2 miles from the nearest maintained trail. A creek ran about 300 feet to the east, providing fresh water and attracting wildlife to the area. The group had brought coolers packed with food, cases of beer, and 2 bottles of whiskey. None of them had brought bear spray or proper food storage containers, despite warnings posted at the forest entrance about bear activity in the region. As evening approached, the drinking intensified. By 7 o'clock, all 5 men were heavily intoxicated, their judgment impaired, and their voices loud enough to echo through the surrounding forest. They built a fire and cooked steaks directly over the flames, the smell of cooking meat spreading through the area. Food scraps were tossed carelessly into the brush, and empty beer cans littered the campsite perimeter. Around 8:30, as the sun began setting behind the mountains, one friend stumbled away from the campfire to urinate in the woods. He had walked approximately 50 feet from camp when he stopped abruptly, his alcohol-fogged brain taking several seconds to process what he was seeing. A bear cub, probably 4 months old and weighing around 35 pounds, was nosing through some brush about 20 feet away. He called out to the others, his voice slurred but excited. The remaining 4 men grabbed their beers and stumbled toward his position, laughing and shouting as they caught sight of the cub. The small bear looked up at the approaching humans, its ears rotating forward as it tried to assess the threat level. What should have triggered immediate retreat instead sparked a series of increasingly reckless decisions. One friend pulled out his phone and started recording video, moving closer to get a better angle. Another, emboldened by whiskey and peer pressure, picked up a stick and waved it near the cub, trying to make it stand on its hind legs for the camera. The cub backed away, making small huffing sounds. Marcus, who had been the most intoxicated of the group, suddenly announced that he wanted to take the cub back home. The others initially laughed, but Marcus became insistent. He argued that the cub was alone and probably abandoned, that it would die out here anyway, and that it would be an incredible conversation piece. The least intoxicated friend suggested they should leave the cub alone and return to camp. His concerns were immediately shouted down by the other 4. The group dynamic had shifted into something dangerous, a combination of alcohol, masculine posturing, and the desire to one-up each other's stories. One friend mentioned that his uncle had a hunting rifle in his truck, parked about a quarter mile away at the trailhead. Marcus seized on this idea, declaring that if they couldn't take the cub alive, he wanted its pelt as a trophy. The others enthusiastically supported this plan. American black bears are North America's most common bear species, with adults weighing between 200 and 600 pounds, though some males can exceed 700 pounds. Female black bears typically give birth to 2 or 3 cubs in winter dens, and these cubs remain with their mother for approximately 18 months while learning survival skills. Mother bears are extraordinarily protective of their cubs and will aggressively defend them against any perceived threat, including humans. A charging black bear can reach speeds of 30 miles per hour and possesses enough strength to break a human spine with a single swipe of its paw. The friend returned approximately 15 minutes later, carrying a bolt-action hunting rifle. He handed the rifle to Marcus, who had never fired a gun before, but was too drunk to care about his lack of experience. Marcus chambered a round with assistance, the metallic sound sharp in the evening air. He raised the rifle to his shoulder, his stance awkward and his aim unsteady. What none of the 5 men realized was that the cub's mother had been nearby the entire time. She had been foraging approximately 150 feet away, within earshot but not immediately visible through the dense undergrowth. The moment her cub began making alarm calls, she had started moving toward the sound. Marcus fired. The shot was poorly aimed, striking the cub in its hindquarters rather than delivering a clean kill. The young bear screamed, a high-pitched, agonized sound that cut through the forest like a siren. It tried to run, but its injured leg collapsed and it fell, crying out again. The mother bear's response was instantaneous and explosive. She charged from the tree line at full speed, covering the 100 feet between her position and the group in less than 4 seconds. Her roar was deafening, a sound of pure rage that finally penetrated the men's alcohol-impaired awareness. One friend saw her first and screamed a warning, but there was no time to react. The sow weighed approximately 400 pounds and was driven by the most powerful instinct in nature, protecting her offspring. She didn't slow down or hesitate, she simply crashed into Marcus like a freight train. The impact knocked Marcus off his feet and sent the rifle flying into the brush. The bear was on him before he hit the ground, her claws raking across his chest and abdomen with devastating force. The claws tore through his shirt and skin as if they were tissue paper, opening deep lacerations that exposed muscle and bone. The bear's jaws clamped onto Marcus's shoulder, her teeth punching through the joint and crushing bone. She shook her head violently, the same motion she would use to break the neck of prey. The friend with access to the rifle fumbled to retrieve it. His hands were shaking so badly from fear and alcohol that he could barely grip it. He managed to chamber another round and raise the weapon, but the bear and Marcus were too close together. He couldn't get a clear shot without risking hitting his friend. 2 others had already started running, their survival instincts overriding any thought of helping Marcus. They crashed through the underbrush toward the campsite, their panicked flight making enough noise to wake the entire forest. The remaining friend stood frozen, his mind unable to process the horror unfolding in front of him. He watched as the bear released Marcus's shoulder and immediately attacked again, this time biting down on his head. The force of the bite was catastrophic, crushing Marcus's skull and causing immediate fatal trauma. The friend with the rifle finally fired, but his hands were shaking so badly that the shot went wide, missing both the bear and Marcus. The sound of the gunshot startled the bear enough to make her pause. She released Marcus's body and turned toward the shooter. He dropped the rifle and ran. His intoxication made his movements clumsy, and he tripped over a fallen log after only 20 feet, sprawling face first into the dirt. He scrambled to his feet, but the bear didn't pursue him. Instead, she returned to her injured cub, making low, moaning sounds as she nuzzled the small bear. The final friend finally broke from his paralysis and ran toward the campsite, where the others were already throwing gear into their vehicles. None of them went back for Marcus. It was September 18, 2016, and the early morning mist hung low over the mountains of northwestern wilderness as Ray checked his equipment one final time before heading into the backcountry. At 47 years old, Ray had been working as a professional hunting guide for 23 years and had developed a reputation for being somewhat complacent about safety protocols, occasionally cutting corners that more cautious guides followed religiously. Ray's client for this 5-day hunt was Michael, a 42-year-old surgeon who had paid $7,500 for a guided elk hunt on a private ranch that covered approximately 12,000 acres of prime habitat. Michael had hunted deer before, but had never pursued elk, and he relied completely on Ray's expertise for this expedition. They had arrived at the ranch on September 16th, spending the first day scouting and practicing at the range to ensure Michael was comfortable with his rifle. The weapon was a bolt-action rifle in a caliber specifically designed for large game, loaded with premium ammunition, designed to deliver maximum energy transfer and deep penetration. On the morning of September 18th, Ray and Michael departed their base camp at 5:30, well before sunrise. They traveled by ATV for approximately 3 miles before parking and continuing on foot. Ray had received reports from ranch hands that a large herd of elk had been spotted in a high meadow near the property's northern boundary. The hike took 90 minutes, climbing steadily through pine forest until they reached the edge of a large meadow, approximately 800 yards across. The sun was just beginning to illuminate the landscape when Ray spotted the herd, approximately 40 elk, including several mature bulls, grazing in the meadow's center. Ray and Michael spent the next hour carefully stalking closer, using terrain features and scattered trees for cover. The wind was favorable, blowing from the elk toward the hunters, which meant their scent wouldn't alert the animals. By 7:15, they had closed the distance to approximately 250 yards and had identified a mature bull that met the ranch's harvest criteria: Rocky Mountain elk, are one of North America's largest land mammals, with mature bulls weighing between 700 and 1,100 pounds and standing 5 feet tall at the shoulder. Their most distinctive feature is their massive antlers, which can span over 4 feet and weigh up to 40 pounds. Despite their size, elk are remarkably fast and agile, capable of running at speeds up to 40 miles per hour. When wounded, elk can travel for miles before succumbing to their injuries, and a cornered or wounded elk can be extremely dangerous. At 7:23, Michael fired. The shot echoed across the meadow and the bull stumbled but didn't fall. The remainder of the herd exploded into motion, scattering in multiple directions with panicked energy. The wounded bull ran with them, heading toward the tree line on the meadow's far side. Ray immediately moved to where the bull had been standing, searching for blood sign that would indicate where the bullet had struck. He found bright red blood spattered on grass and rocks, but the pattern concerned him. The blood wasn't frothy, which would indicate a lung shot, and there wasn't enough of it to suggest a major artery had been hit. He told Michael that the shot had likely struck too far back, possibly hitting the liver or stomach area. This was problematic for multiple reasons. A liver-shot elk would eventually die, but it could take hours and the animal might cover several miles before succumbing. More critically, a wounded elk in pain would be unpredictable and potentially dangerous if cornered. Standard protocol in this situation called for waiting at least 30 minutes before pursuing, allowing the wounded animal time to lie down and stiffen up. However, Ray made a decision that would prove fatal. He decided to pursue immediately. His reasoning was that the blood trail was fresh and easy to follow, and he didn't want to risk losing the animal if rain moved in later that day. Michael agreed to the immediate pursuit. They gathered their gear and entered the tree line where the elk had disappeared, following a blood trail that was initially easy to track. The wounded bull had crashed through underbrush, leaving broken branches and disturbed soil in addition to blood droplets. For the first 20 minutes, the tracking was straightforward. The blood trail led generally northeast, climbing gradually through mixed pine and aspen forest. Ray moved confidently, his rifle held at a ready position, while Michael followed approximately 10 feet behind. At 8:35, they entered a small clearing surrounded by dense brush and fallen timber. Ray was focused on the ground, searching for the next blood sign, when Michael suddenly grabbed his shoulder and pointed ahead. The elk was there, approximately 40 feet away, partially concealed behind a large fallen log. The bull was standing, not bedded down as Ray had expected, and its posture was all wrong. Instead of the drooping head and labored breathing of a dying animal, the elk's head was up, ears forward, and its eyes were locked on the two hunters. Ray raised his rifle, but he was too slow. The elk charged before Ray could get the weapon to his shoulder, covering the 40 feet in less than 3 seconds. The bull's head was lowered, antlers forward, driven by pain and the instinct to eliminate the threat that had been pursuing it. The elk hit Ray with the full force of its 800-pound body, the impact lifting him off his feet and slamming him backward into a tree trunk. The collision knocked the rifle from Ray's hands and drove the air from his lungs. Before Ray could even process what was happening, the elk was on him again. The bull reared up and brought its front hooves down on Ray's chest and abdomen. Each hoof weighed several pounds and was backed by hundreds of pounds of force. The first strike cracked ribs and caused massive internal trauma. The second strike, landing slightly lower, ruptured organs and caused catastrophic internal bleeding. Michael fired from a distance of approximately 20 feet. The shot struck the elk in the chest, penetrating the heart and causing massive trauma. The bull took 2 more steps forward before its legs buckled and it collapsed. Michael immediately ran to Ray, who was lying motionless against the tree trunk. Ray was conscious but in severe shock, his breathing rapid and shallow. His chest was visibly deformed from the broken ribs, and blood was beginning to seep from his mouth, a sign of internal bleeding. Despite the surgical team's efforts, Ray's injuries were too severe. He had lost too much blood before reaching the hospital, and his organs had sustained too much damage. Ray was pronounced dead at 3:17 in the afternoon on September 18, 2016. It was March 14, 2017, and the afternoon sun beat down on the desert highway as Officer Daniel ran radar from his patrol vehicle on the shoulder. At 34 years old, Daniel had been with the Sheriff's Department for 9 years and was known among his colleagues for his methodical approach to police work and his strong bond with his K-9 partner. He had spent the last 3 years assigned to the K-9 unit, working with Rex, a 4-year-old German Shepherd trained in narcotics detection and suspect apprehension. Daniel's shift had been routine so far. He had issued 3 speeding citations and assisted with one minor traffic accident. Rex was in his specially designed compartment in the patrol vehicle's rear, a climate-controlled kennel with reinforced doors and windows that could be opened remotely. Around 3:15, Daniel's radar unit registered a vehicle traveling 87 miles per hour in a 65-mile-per-hour zone. Daniel activated his emergency lights and pulled onto the highway, accelerating to catch up with the speeding vehicle. An older model sedan with expired registration tags visible even from a distance. The vehicle didn't immediately pull over, instead continuing for approximately 1 mile before finally stopping on the shoulder. This delay immediately elevated Daniel's alertness level. Vehicles that don't stop promptly often indicate drivers who are impaired, have warrants, or are attempting to hide contraband. Daniel called in the traffic stop over his radio, providing his location and the vehicle's license plate number. Dispatch ran the plate and informed Daniel that the registered owner had an outstanding warrant for failure to appear on a drug possession charge. The registered owner was listed as Anthony, a 31-year-old male with a criminal history that included drug offenses and one prior arrest for resisting arrest. Daniel acknowledged the information and approached the vehicle cautiously, his right hand resting on his service weapon. He could see one occupant, a male driver who matched the general description of Anthony. As Daniel reached the driver's window, he noticed several concerning indicators. The driver was sweating heavily despite the vehicle's air conditioning. His hands were shaking on the steering wheel, and his eyes were dilated. Daniel asked for the driver's license and registration. The driver confirmed he was Anthony and fumbled with his wallet, dropping it twice before finally producing his license. His movements were jerky and uncoordinated, consistent with stimulant intoxication. Daniel also noticed a chemical smell coming from the vehicle. After approximately 2 minutes of non-compliance, Daniel made the decision to physically remove Anthony from the vehicle. He opened the driver's door and reached for Anthony's arm, intending to guide him out. Anthony jerked away and suddenly threw the vehicle into drive, attempting to flee. Daniel grabbed Anthony's shirt with both hands and pulled backward, trying to prevent the vehicle from moving with Anthony still partially in control. The vehicle lurched forward approximately 10 feet before stalling. Anthony was on his feet first. Instead of running, he turned on Daniel and attacked. Anthony threw a wild punch that caught Daniel on the side of his head, stunning him momentarily. Before Daniel could recover, Anthony was on top of him, throwing punches and trying to grab Daniel's service weapon. German Shepherds are one of the most popular breeds for police and military work, prized for their intelligence, trainability, and protective instincts. Adult males typically weigh between 65 and 90 pounds and stand 22 to 26 inches at the shoulder. They possess exceptional bite force, measured at approximately 238 pounds per square inch. Police K9s undergo extensive training in controlled aggression, learning to bite and hold suspects on command, while also learning to release immediately when commanded. Daniel managed to block Anthony's attempt to grab his weapon, but he was in a defensive position on his back with Anthony on top of him. The two men struggled in the dirt beside the highway, Daniel trying to gain control while Anthony fought with the desperate strength of someone facing prison time and high on methamphetamine. Inside the patrol vehicle, Rex had been alerted the moment the struggle began. The German Shepherd could hear his handler's distressed breathing and the sounds of combat. Rex began barking frantically and throwing himself against the kennel door, his training and protective instincts fully activated. Anthony managed to land several more punches to Daniel's face and head, causing significant pain and disorientation. Anthony's hands found Daniel's throat and began squeezing. The patrol vehicle's windows had been left partially open, approximately 3 inches, to ensure air circulation for Rex, despite the climate-controlled kennel. Rex, driven by the sounds of his handler in distress, focused his attention on the partially open window. The German Shepherd began forcing his muzzle through the gap, pushing and twisting with single-minded determination. The window frame began to crack under the pressure. Rex forced his head through, the tight space scraping skin from his muzzle and ears. But the dog didn't stop. With his head free, Rex could now use his front legs for leverage. The already damaged window frame gave way completely, and Rex squeezed through the opening, dropping to the ground beside the patrol vehicle. The German Shepherd immediately located his handler and the threat. Rex covered the 20 feet between the patrol vehicle and the struggling men in less than 2 seconds. His training and protective instincts fully engaged, He attacked without warning. Rex's jaws clamped onto Anthony's right arm, the arm that was reaching for Daniel's weapon. The bite was immediate and devastating, Rex's teeth punching through skin and muscle to find bone. Anthony screamed and released his grip on Daniel's throat. Daniel gasped for air, his vision slowly clearing as oxygen returned to his brain. He could see Rex shaking his head violently, the trained behavior designed to cause maximum damage and force compliance. Anthony, in his panic and pain, made a critical mistake. He drew back his left arm and punched Rex in the head, a desperate attempt to make the dog release. The blow landed solidly on Rex's skull, causing pain, but no real damage. The punch transformed Rex's behavior from controlled apprehension to genuine aggression. Rex released Anthony's arm and immediately re-engaged, this time targeting Anthony's throat. The bite was catastrophic. Rex's jaws closed on Anthony's neck with full force, his teeth finding the carotid artery and jugular vein. Anthony's screams cut off immediately, replaced by a horrible gurgling sound as blood filled his airway. Daniel finally managed to force his fingers into Rex's mouth, pushing against the dog's jaw muscles and triggering the release reflex. Rex's jaws opened and Daniel immediately pulled the dog backward, away from Anthony's body. Anthony collapsed onto his back, blood pumping from the massive wounds in his neck. Daniel immediately applied pressure to the wounds with his hands, but there were too many punctures, and the damage was too severe. Anthony was pronounced dead at the scene at 3:47, approximately 25 minutes after the initial traffic stop. The official cause of death was listed as exsanguination due to multiple penetrating injuries to the neck.
Thanks for watching. If you liked these stories, click here.